When most people think about air combat dominance, the same three names come up every time: the United States, Russia, and China. These are the countries with trillion-dollar defense budgets, massive aerospace industries, and fighter jets that look like they came straight out of a Hollywood movie. The F-35, the Su-57, jets that are sold as unbeatable, untouchable, and far beyond the reach of smaller nations. That belief feels logical. Bigger countries should build better jets. More money should mean more power. That's the story we've been told for decades. But what if that story is starting to crack? What if a small country with a population smaller than New York City is quietly preparing a move that could shake the global fighter jet hierarchy? Not with a flashy stealth reveal, not with a science fiction concept jet, but with something far more dangerous, a real upgrade happening right now. This isn't Top Gun. There's no dramatic carrier launch or slow-motion helmet shot. This is the kind of change that doesn't trend on social media at first, but forces generals, defense planners, and rival manufacturers to sit up and pay attention. Sweden is doing something unexpected with its Gripen fighter jet. For years, the Gripen has been treated as the budget option, the practical choice, the jet you buy when you can't afford the real fighters. It's been underestimated, overlooked, and often dismissed as a lightweight that knows its place. But behind the scenes, that's starting to change. A quiet shift is underway, a shift that could alter how future air wars are fought, how fighter jets are sold, and which countries get to stay independent when global tensions rise. And at the center of this shift is an engine upgrade that very few people are talking about, yet. One of the most powerful aerospace companies in the world has stepped into the picture. Not loudly, not publicly, but deliberately. If this move succeeds, it won't just improve one jet. It could change how we think about lightweight fighters altogether. What they can do, who they threaten, and why size and budget may no longer decide air superiority. By the end of this video, you may look at small fighter jets very differently. Next, to understand why what's happening now is so surprising, you first need to understand what the Gripen was designed to be, and what it was never meant to compete against. Saab's Gripen was not built to dominate the skies in the same way American or Russian fighters were. It wasn't designed to project power halfway across the world. It wasn't built to sit on massive aircraft carriers or operate from giant air bases protected by layers of defenses. It was built to survive. Sweden's entire defense strategy is different. During the Cold War, Sweden assumed something simple and brutal. If a war broke out, their air bases would be among the first targets. So instead of relying on a few large runways, Sweden built a system where fighter jets could take off and land on ordinary highways, refuel in minutes, and disappear before the enemy could strike again. The Gripen reflects that philosophy. It's compact, it's rugged, it can be serviced by a small ground crew using trucks instead of massive hangars. In some cases, it can be turned around and ready to fly again in under 10 minutes. That's not glamorous, but in a real war, it's powerful. This design also made the Gripen cheap to operate. While jets like the F-35 can cost around $30,000 to $35,000 per flight hour, the Gripen comes in at roughly $4,000 to $5,000 per hour. That means a country can fly it more often, train pilots better, and keep more jets in the air during a crisis. But here's the problem. In the public imagination, cheap often means inferior. When people see sleek stealth fighters like the F-35, Rafale, or Su-57, they assume those jets are automatically better, faster, stronger, more lethal. The Gripen, by comparison, looks small, modest, almost humble. And that perception stuck. Even though the Gripen carries modern radar, advanced electronic warfare systems, and NATO standard weapons, it was still labeled the budget fighter. The jet that makes compromises. The aircraft that knows it can't compete head-to-head with the heavyweights. There was one criticism that never went away. No matter how smart or efficient the Gripen was, critics argued that it simply didn't have enough raw power. Its engine was reliable and efficient, but not overwhelming. And you know, in an era where air combat is becoming more power-hungry by the year, that limitation was seen as something the Gripen could never escape. That engine question became the line people drew in the sand, and that's where the pressure began to build. The engine inside today's Gripen is not a bad engine. In fact, it's a very good one. The Gripen E and F use the General Electric F414, a proven and reliable power plant that also flies in aircraft like the F/A-18 Super Hornet. It delivers around 22,000 pounds of thrust, which is more than enough to give the Gripen its famous agility, short takeoff ability, and low fuel burn. This engine is one of the reasons the Gripen can operate from highways and rough runways without breaking down. So the problem was never failure. The problem is the future. Modern fighter jets are no longer judged only by how fast they fly or how tightly they turn. They are judged by how much power they can generate and distribute. Today's fighters are becoming flying data centers. They carry powerful AESA radars, electronic warfare jammers, sensor fusion systems, and soon even directed energy weapons. All of that requires electricity. Think of it like upgrading a house. Years ago, a simple electrical panel was enough to run lights and appliances. But once you start adding electric cars, heat pumps, and solar systems, that same panel becomes a bottleneck. The house still works, but it can't grow. That's exactly the situation the Gripen is facing. The F414 can power today's systems, but future upgrades will demand far more electrical output. More jamming power, more radar range, faster data processing. And when an engine can't generate enough power, engineers are forced to make trade-offs: smaller radars, weaker jammers, limited upgrade paths. That's dangerous in a world where adversaries are improving fast. Russia, China, and even Western allies are pushing toward more power-hungry aircraft. The F-35, for example, is already facing challenges supplying enough electrical power for future upgrades, and that jet was designed with power in mind from the beginning. Now imagine a lighter fighter trying to keep up. This creates a quiet but serious risk, being good today, but outdated tomorrow. A jet that flies well but can't support the systems needed to survive in contested airspace 5 or 10 years from now. So the question facing Sweden and Saab became unavoidable. If the Gripen doesn't evolve now, if it doesn't gain more power, more electrical capacity, and more growth room, what happens when the next generation of air combat arrives? That question set the stage for something unexpected. This is where the story takes a sharp turn. Instead of tweaking the existing engine or squeezing out small efficiency gains, a completely different player steps into the picture. And not as a supplier, but as a strategic force. Rolls-Royce. Most people hear that name and think of luxury cars or giant airliners. But in military aviation, Rolls-Royce sits at the very top of the engine world. They build combat engines for the Eurofighter Typhoon. They are leading the propulsion program for Europe's 6th-generation fighter, Tempest. This is a company that designs engines not just for today's aircraft, but for what air combat will look like decades from now. And quietly, without flashy announcements, Rolls-Royce has been developing a next-generation fighter engine core. Not a full production engine yet. A core, the heart of the system. The part that defines how much thrust, heat, and electrical power an engine can handle. This core is designed to survive much higher temperatures, manage airflow more intelligently, and generate far more power than traditional designs. Sources familiar with the program suggest this new engine could deliver around 15% more thrust than the Gripen's current F414. That number sounds small until you understand what it means in a single-engine fighter. A 15% increase would push the Gripen close to 26,000 pounds of thrust. That's not an incremental upgrade. That's a fundamental shift. It changes climb rate. It changes acceleration. It changes how much fuel, weapons, and sensors the jet can carry without losing performance. In real combat terms, it means reaching altitude faster. It means staying supersonic longer. It means having power left over when everything else is switched on, radar, jammers, sensors, instead of choosing which systems to turn off. This is the moment where the Gripen stops being the affordable option and starts becoming something far more dangerous. Because once you give a lightweight fighter heavyweight power, you don't just improve it, you redefine it. And the engine itself is only part of that story. One of the key ideas behind this design is something called an adaptive cycle engine. In simple terms, it means the engine can change its behavior depending on what the jet needs at that moment. When the pilot needs raw power, during takeoff, a climb, or a dogfight, the engine shifts into a high-thrust mode. When the jet is cruising or loitering, it switches to a more fuel-efficient mode automatically. Think of it like a car that can instantly transform between a race engine and a hybrid commuter system without the driver doing anything. You get power when you need it, efficiency when you don't. Another critical element is the use of ceramic matrix composites. These are advanced materials that can survive much higher temperatures than traditional metals. And in jet engines, heat equals power. The hotter an engine can safely run, the more energy it can extract from the same amount of fuel. This means more thrust without making the engine larger or heavier, a huge advantage for a lightweight fighter. But the most overlooked upgrade may be electrical power. Modern air combat is fought with electrons as much as missiles. AESA radars scan huge areas of sky. Electronic warfare systems jam enemy sensors. Data links connect fighters, drones, and ground units in real time. All of this demands electricity, and a lot of it. Rolls-Royce claims this new engine architecture can generate roughly double the electrical power of older fighter engines. That's not a minor improvement. That's the difference between barely keeping up and staying ahead. Finally, there's survivability. A redesigned exhaust and nozzle can reduce the jet's infrared signature, making it harder for heat-seeking missiles to lock on. It doesn't make the Gripen invisible, but it gives pilots more time to react. And in air combat, seconds matter. When you put all of this together, the picture becomes clear. This engine doesn't just make the Gripen faster, it makes it smarter, stronger, and far more future-proof. And that matters more than ever, because the world around Sweden is, well, changing fast. For decades, Sweden built its military around one big assumption, that it would have to stand alone if a war ever came. That's actually why its aircraft, including the Gripen, were designed to survive without large alliances, foreign bases, or any guaranteed resupply. But now, that assumption has changed. With Russia's war in Ukraine really reshaping European security, Sweden has moved toward NATO membership. Overnight, the Gripen isn't just a national defense fighter anymore. It becomes part of a much larger air combat ecosystem, flying alongside F-35s, Typhoons, and other NATO jets all across Europe. And, that really raises the stakes. In a NATO environment, performance gaps become a lot more visible. A jet that can't keep up in range, payload, or power risks being sidelined. More thrust isn't just about dogfighting. It's also about operating in Arctic conditions, carrying heavier sensors, and staying effective in harsh weather where cold air, icing, and long distances really punish weak power margins. But there's another issue that matters just as much: sovereignty. When a country relies on foreign engines, it also relies on foreign political decisions. US-made engines come with export controls, usage restrictions, and honestly, supply chain vulnerabilities. In peacetime, that's usually manageable. But in a crisis, it becomes a serious risk. Engine sovereignty means control over your most critical component. It means access to spare parts during conflict. It means being able to upgrade systems without having to ask for permission. It means your Air Force doesn't lose capability because of a diplomatic dispute thousands of miles away. For Sweden, this isn't just theoretical, it's actually history. A Gripen powered by a European engine reduces dependence on U.S. approvals and aligns Sweden more closely with Europe's future air combat programs. It also gives Sweden leverage, politically and militarily, inside NATO. At that point, the engine stops being just an engineering upgrade. It becomes a strategic asset. And once that happens, other countries start paying attention. Once you change the balance of power inside a fighter jet, you don't just affect the country that flies it. You actually reshape the global market. For years, the Gripen has sat on the sidelines of major fighter competitions. Not because it was incapable, but because it was perceived as limited. A smart jet, yes, but not one that could grow into the future demands of air combat. A more powerful Gripen changes that conversation completely. Take India, for example. India's MRFA fighter program is about more than buying jets. It's about independence. India wants advanced fighters without being locked into US or Russian political pressure. A Gripen with European engine sovereignty and significantly higher power suddenly fits that requirement far better than before. Then there's Brazil, which already operates the Gripen E. Brazil faces huge distances, dense terrain, and limited basing options across the Amazon. More thrust means longer reach, heavier payloads, and faster response times, without buying an entirely new aircraft. An engine upgrade offers a massive capability boost at a fraction of the cost. In Southeast Asia, budgets matter. Countries like Thailand and the Philippines want modern fighters, but can't afford fleets that cost tens of thousands of dollars per flight hour. They're choosing between capability and sustainability. A higher-powered Gripen threatens jets like the F-16 Block 70 and the F-A-50 by offering advanced performance without crippling operating costs. This is where the numbers get serious. Fighter contracts are worth billions of dollars, and they lock countries into supply chains and alliances for decades. If the Gripen becomes the most capable lightweight fighter in its class, money starts moving, away from American dominance and toward a more diversified market. At that point, this story stops being about Sweden. It becomes about who controls the future of affordable air power. For all the promise this engine brings, nothing about it is guaranteed. Developing a new fighter engine is one of the hardest and most expensive tasks in aerospace. Costs rise fast. Timelines slip. Even small design changes can force major aircraft redesigns. Saab would need to modify airflow, cooling systems, and internal layouts to make a new engine fit without compromising the Gripen's strengths. There's also the risk of success becoming a problem. If the Gripen becomes more powerful, it may also become more expensive, and affordability has always been its biggest advantage. Push the price too high, and the jet risks losing the very customers it was meant to attract. Then there's politics. The United States has a strong interest in keeping its defense ecosystem dominant. Would Washington quietly pressure partners to stick with American engines for interoperability and logistics reasons? Would choosing a European engine complicate joint operations or supply agreements? These are not technical questions. They are political ones. But if Rolls-Royce succeeds, the ripple effects could be huge. A new engine race could begin. Fighters like the F-16, South Korea's KF-21, and even advanced drones could adopt similar adaptive engines. Air combat would shift toward platforms that are cheaper to operate but smarter, faster, and harder to counter. There's also a longer-term vision. The Gripen could evolve into a loyal wingman platform, flying alongside Europe's sixth-generation Tempest fighter. In that role, it wouldn't need to replace stealth jets. It would support them, extend their reach, and absorb risk. Saab would position itself as a bridge between today's fighters and tomorrow's systems. So here's the real question. Should Sweden stick with proven American engines and safe assumptions? Or should it take the risk and redefine what a lightweight fighter can be? Because if this engine delivers, the Gripen won't just break the rules, it will rewrite them. If you enjoy deep dives into military technology and the future of air combat, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And let me know in the comments, Would you trust a lightweight fighter to challenge the world's heavyweights? Thanks for watching.